welcome to Delhi Dialogue, the one show that brings to us politicians, policymakers, aspirants and everybody else who will be important on the 16th of May. With me today, Suresh Prabhu. Thank you very much for talking to us. You had a very successful conclave where you did host Mr. Modi, a whole host of other academicians, economists. I am going to speak to you about the whole India growth story, the infrastructure, the power, the oil and gas, because that's something that you truly understand, and you did bring in reforms when you were in charge. I'm going to speak to you whether or not I'm speaking to NDA's energy minister in a moment from now, but let me first begin by talking to you about what is the situation on the ground really looking like? There have been opinion polls that Mr. Modi is perhaps the front runner for 2014. There have been global brokerage houses who've put in their reports based on that. Is there a real Modi wave on the ground, or do you believe that, or would you want to err on the side of caution and believe that opinion polls apart, let's wait for the final poll outcomes?
You know, normally we always talk about a wave when the election results are over. Because no one gauges it before it. But this time you can very clearly, visibly see the enthusiasm of the people, the commitment of the people who have never been in politics, the younger generation, and they are quite a significant numbers. They have been taking upon themselves the responsibility of ensuring that there is a change in the government. Why? See, the result is how the wave gets generated. So there are two main reasons for it.
Right.
One is the great achievements of this government, which, and as you all know, and secondly, the people feel that we really need a strong leadership who believes in two things: a development as a principal driving force and an invisible hand of governance. You know, we need both. We need tangible results in terms of development when you see roads, car, or something happening on the ground.
Right.
But what drives that is a governance which is invisible. So I think this is really an hardware and software story. Of hardware, people want development, and software, the people want governance.
I'm going to ask you this question. Global investors that you speak to believe that India has paid a price for poor governance in the last 10 years or in the last 5 years, to speak about more specifically, policy paralysis. Things have changed, and the worst critics of this government will believe that things did move in the last 6 months, but that was perhaps too late. But India has paid a price for governance. According to you and according to your assessment, what will Mr. Modi's priority be? Will he be looking at changing this perception that we are not really halting, or will he actually have to, address the nuts and bolts, because there are very many structural issues because of what we have slowed down?
Yeah, absolutely right. We need both. First, the leadership itself has something to do on a bearing of governance. If there is no leadership, there is no governance. So the leadership will definitely be important, so which Narendra Modi can provide. But that in itself may not be enough to inspire the type of aspiration that people have and that they have to fulfill those. So probably also the structural changes will have to be introduced. Why in India we should take probably 10 times more of a time than normal to start a business? Why it should take even more time, bigger than this, to wind up a business?
That's right.
Why should you not be able to do something, a small medium enterprise? Why do you need to go to 20, 30 different clearances? Because ultimately, you are actually killing the entrepreneurship of that. So governance is related to business in this form. And if you take common man, he's not interested in governance of a big time, that we are changing policy, etc. He's interested that I get my death certificate, my birth certificate, my caste certificate, unfortunately still needed, and bank loan or stuff like this, education, admission in the school, which happens without too much of hassles and corruption. So governance itself, I will tell you, can add significantly to the GDP. So governance is not something which we have to discuss as an abstract term. This is something which actually affects each and every person's lives, which are said at the ground level, but also creates a macro level change, which is so significant.
Let me ask you this question. Mr. Modi is known to be this poster boy of development. He's done wonders with Gujarat, and that's his really poll campaign. He is saying, I will bring development to India and not just restrict it to Gujarat. I want to ask you this question, and because you've been in public life yourself for many decades now, some of the things that you spoke about, a death certificate, a birth certificate, a caste certificate, a loan, just daily regulations that the common man has to face, power tariffs, telecom tariffs, things like that. How important is it for the role of the Prime Minister to intervene? Is this not something that needs to be addressed by bureaucrats? Does this really need change right at the top? And why so, if it does?
See, they are absolutely right. But, look at it like this. There are certain institutions that we have created. certain frameworks that we have created are basically applicable all over the country. For example, income tax department, which is also source of corruption and source of agreement by the people. It's an all India institution. Look at our administrative setup, which is actually at the apex is the all India service IAS or IRAS or IPS people. So they are administered by the same rules which are governing at a central level. So you are absolutely right that Prime Minister alone cannot bring the change, but Prime Minister can actually initiate a change, create a model, because these are all India institutions, all India applications, which can then be introduced at state level. But actually speaking, it's the states which will have to take a leadership role. It's an aggregation of states' development which contributes to the total GDP of the country.
I'm going to speak to you about states in just a bit, sir, but I have a more specific question to ask of you. If you speak to some of the tallest leaders in India Inc., one of the reasons why confidence has taken a hit and because of which investments have completely halted is because of a very overactive judiciary. I mean, look at what happened to telecom licenses. 122 telecom licenses were cancelled in one go. Mining, there has been a halt by the courts. The CAG audits that have been done, the CAG reports that have been put out, it has almost painted India Inc. as being a bunch of people who are actually looting the system, looting the exchequer. If I were to ask you, has a lot of damage not been done by these institutions also as far as our economic growth is concerned? Can all of this really be blamed on the government alone?
See, why are these institutions, which are really speaking no role to play on a prima facie basis, why are they getting intervened? Why are they intervening in it? Because it's a failure of the executive. If the executive can act and act effectively, there is no reason why any other institutions can come and poach into their territory. So this is not possible. So therefore, first and foremost, we really need to ensure that the government governs and governs effectively in a way that they do not create a vacuum or a space for others to enter. So you must play that role, one. But secondly, is very fundamental question that you are really saying is absolutely right. We really need to codify the roles of each and every arms of the state. We are now not just 4, probably including media, but we have even now the 6 different arms of the state. Executive must codify the roles and say this is what executive will do. Parliament must make policy. This is my strong belief, that Parliament has to make policy which is executed by the executive. That's what they call executive. And the judiciary must only look at what comes as an interpretation of law or the failure of the executive or the legislature in terms of not fulfilling the responsibility. And of course, the courts have a responsibility.
There's a certain question that comes to my mind because you have been a part of policy making. You initiated the big ticket reforms in power. It's unfortunate they couldn't really take off ever. But let me ask you this question. How different is policy making now vis-a-vis what it used to be 10 years back? And particularly on Mr. Modi, how difficult will it be for him to form policies which are perhaps going to be path-breaking simply because policy making is now happening in full public glare?
Policy making has always been difficult. We feel sitting in Delhi that we know everything. It's not possible.
That's not true.
The government cannot be the sole claimant of the wisdom. So I think the intelligence, the knowledge, the experience stand outside. So we must try to get it out.
So is your prescription here that if Mr. Modi does come to power, his approach to policy making has to be consensus building? It is not something that can be done in the confines of North or South bloc alone?
No, absolutely. What really is necessary, the Prime Minister's office should bring consensus among the ministries. But it's a job of a minister, primarily, whatever sector he is responsible for, to build consensus outside. And I think the Prime Minister must be the leader of all the states of India also. He's not just the leader of his government in Delhi, but he's also actually in a way like a father figure to all the states. So all the chief ministers must be his partners.
Mr. Modi is seen as somebody who's pro-business, who's pro-growth, who's pro-development. Does he run the risk of being criticized, of being too close to business as he forms policies? Will charges of crony capitalism follow unabated because whatever you do will either benefit or harm one business or the other? Is that a risk that one runs? But that's a risk one runs.
Look at, you talked about, and we started with this, India's growth story.
Right.
Where did it come from? You must always remember that China's growth story came because of the large-scale leadership provided by the government-owned companies and the government itself making huge investments into infrastructure. India's growth story is exactly the opposite of China. India's growth story came from private sector-led story.
Yes.
So the private sector made investment, it reached something like 17% in a good times. So when you have an investment-led growth from private sector, the efficiency of capital is far better. It is
That's
good.
right. Yes.
If you take the incremental ICOR of China and India, India has done better even now. But what I'm saying therefore is, becoming pro-business is becoming pro-growth. Becoming pro-business does not mean becoming anti-poor. It is not that business is something which you have to use to bring about economic growth, because that uses a scarce capital available in India for better use. That doesn't mean that if there is an abuse by a particular business house or an industrialist or whoever, you should take action against that. But that does not mean that you are closed, means you are not taking action against somebody who is doing wrong thing. So what is important is, if you really want to bring about an employment increase in India, we want to create more infrastructure. In any case, we have no choice, because $1 trillion of 5 years investment that we need in infrastructure, 48% has to come from private sector.
Private sector. I will still ask you that question. Does being pro-business mean that you should be prepared, you should be geared, you should have the arms and ammunitions to fight charges of crony capitalism as well? I mean, look at what he's done in Gujarat. It's a great story, but he does face charges of crony capitalism as far as Adanis are concerned, or as far as Mr. Mukesh Ambani is concerned. Is that something that a leader who believes that pro-business, pro-growth has to be prepared for?
You know, this is not something which is confined to India. It's become now a very global issue, that crony capitalism is creating a lot of problems. So the very interesting line put by one of the interesting magazine was that capitalism must fight the capitalists themselves.
That's
because
right.
They are actually, the capitalism is under siege under capitalism. So what is important is, make sure that crony capitalism you must fight, at the same time ensuring that government institutions have the ability to fight it. We need to create a strong arm of regulators. You know, whether we like it or not, government has no ability and shouldn't be creating that ability within the government itself, because there is a conflict of interest. Because there are a lot of businesses or there are a lot of activities which government is going to carry on, whether we like it or not. So therefore, if government is going to be in that business, as well as the private sector is going to also be participating in that business, there is a conflict of interest.
Yes.
So we really need to create a strong regulatory framework. So crony capitalism, we really need to fight, but that doesn't mean that we must make capitalism die.
Some reforms have been initiated. We are taking baby steps towards diesel deregulation. NDA in its first avatar had decided to completely deregulate this commodity because there's a huge subsidy burden the exchequer bears. If the NDA were to come to power, what is your prescription? Should there be complete diesel deregulation? Is this an unnecessary subsidy burden that we are bearing?
You know, actually, there's a lot of misconception about the subsidy issue. The problem is not subsidy. The problem is how we administer the subsidy. We give subsidy to those who don't deserve it. We do not give subsidy to those who really need it. And that's the problem. So we really need
it has to be targeted better.
Absolutely. One. Secondly, on the energy issue, why should we keep looking at only import as an only way to meet our energy demand or energy needs? Why not we make sure that we actually diversify our energy portfolio in a way that we do not really become dependent on imports? And then if you reduce that, then the issue of subsidy also get addressed in a different way. So I think subsidy issue needs not be looked at only in terms of making sure the fiscal issues, but it should be looked at into larger perspective.
So what you're essentially saying here is that complete diesel deregulation is not really the answer in the scenario that we in India exist. There is a population that does need that subsidized diesel.
Absolutely.
I want to turn focus and talk about, I've spoken about diesel, I want to talk about gas. There is a lot of controversy around the KG-D6 gas prices. Mr. Kejriwal wants to make it a political issue. One doesn't know whether it will be an electoral issue or not. But considering there has been so much controversy around that subject, what's your stand? Should that issue be completely relooked, reviewed, or should we just go ahead with the gas price hike? Despite the kind of controversy that has been created, it's also landed in court now.
See, you know, this controversy started only because, firstly, nobody knows how many gas reserves are there. So this should have been the responsibility of DG Hydrocarbons, who is a regulator for this sector. He should have given us exactly the country, the correct information about what is the gas availability in that particular basin. So if it was known, then obviously all the other calculations, because this is based on your technical assessment about how much is available. It is not possible for anybody else outside to know exactly how much gas is there. So therefore, a controversy started because of the failure of the institution of DG Hydrocarbon itself. Subsequent to that, the government policies, which were not never been stable. In last 10 years, we have seen the complete flip-flop of the policies. So which has actually resulted into again this controversy. So to avoid controversy, the best way is to create a technical information system which gives you correct information about what you have. So that brings me to the role of regulator again. That regulator must have the ability to technical competence. They cannot either go away.
Yes. So are you here suggesting that the whole KG-D6 controversy is to be blamed on high expectation that was heightened, created? As far as delivery was concerned, one did not ever know how many reserves were there. So the expectation was we'll get 120 units of gas, whereas the reality was we were getting only 20. So who has to be blamed for this then?
No, exactly. Now of course, who should be blamed is another controversial issue.
Right.
But question is definitely one, is that what happened to that gas reserve which was available? Is it not being taken out for pricing alone, or there are some other reasons which nobody knows? And again, then how much more gas is available there?
True.
Will it be really sufficient enough, even if you pay a higher price, to meet the demand of India, or what is the situation? So I think we really need, therefore I am saying, is that policy making.
Right.
It's also related to policy really. Policy making must encompass all these issues. You cannot be taken by surprise. No one has the ability to talk about everything which you cannot probably factor all those surprises into your policy making. So policy making should be robust enough to actually address them. But at the same time, if policy is not able to capture the reality on the ground, it's a failure of the policy of its first order.
So then what should be done? Prices have been doubled. There have been a lot of opposition from fertilizer ministry, from power ministry that you've been a part of earlier. There's been opposition from civil society. Now it's a political issue. It's also in the court. What should be done with those prices? Should one, that is why I'm asking you, from your standpoint, should one step back and say that because there is so much of controversy, let's completely review this issue?
We cannot just say because any issue is controversial, that's why we should not deal with the issue. See, whether we like it or not, India needs gas.
Right.
We need it as a feedstock for fertilizers. We need it as a fuel for power stations.
Right.
We need it for multiple uses, including domestic use, where we use it for cooking. So gas is something which is necessary. Unfortunately, we do not have enough gas. And we could not even bring that pipeline into India, which we have talked about for a long time. So there is no natural gas available. So first, we must ensure and find out exactly how much is the gas available in India. Secondly, then comes the pricing issue. So the pricing should be, of course, should be adequate enough to make enough returns for if the investment don't come, nothing will happen. But at the same time, affordability comes in because there are a lot of downstream industries which are based on gas. So I think there is no policy which can please everybody. We really need to find out a policy which actually takes care of all the interests. So there are trade-offs. See, the price is a trade-off issue. If you do not give price,
it has to be incentive.
Exactly. So the trade-off is something which actually is one of the challenge for a public policy.
Mr. Prabhu, I have a question for you. We are a coal surplus country. It's an irony that we are importing coal, adding to our CAD pressures that as it is exist. My question to you really is that is privatization of Coal India the only option that some experts speak about, or do you believe there is an alternate mechanism that can be brought into force and will address this issue of coal scarcity?
See, we should be clear about, privatization is not panacea to all ills. So we should be clear about why we are privatization. One is the ability of the public sector companies or the company which owns it today is not enough to actually bring about the type of results you want. So what is the result you want? You want more production. So and then every time you privatize an asset anywhere in the world, it becomes controversial because valuation issues will actually come to the fore and there will be a controversy.
Right.
So why not you do like this? Do not privatize the asset. Let ownership remain with the government as it is. You bring in by open bidding contractors to come with their own plant and machinery. You say that we'll get paid for whatever production you make.
Yes.
The product, that's the buying product, the coal, will still remain the property of the government. You will get paid for this. What will the advantage of this? Is that Coal India is mining and they are saying we do not have more capacity to do more mining because we do not have the enough equipment or the manpower. Okay. So new contractors are coming, they're taken the new fields. You come bring
new technology, new
technologies, and also you actually make them bound to the highest levels of environmental sustainability. So therefore, new technology will come, better management practices will come, more coal production will rise. Where is the controversy then?
Sure enough, you raised the issue of environment, and I have a very valid question for you. We've seen a lot of projects being stalled because of environmental concerns, be it first in the Jairam Ramesh, then and the Jayanti Ratarajan. Despite the CCI, projects haven't really taken off because they were always stalled at either environment or forest. Do you believe India is a third world country with first world aspirations? We are still growing, we still want our infrastructure in place, but we have environmental aspirations that the developed world, say a US or a UK, have?
It's really not true that our aspirations are there. If you look at our laws, they are fantastic. So, if somebody were to judge India's environmental practices by law alone, they say very good. What a developed country, more than even US and Europe or Japan, which is far more.
Right.
But in reality, the implementation is absolutely shoddy. We really need to enforce our laws effectively. It's not that, we are actually not enforcing the law, one. Secondly, we must bring in transparency. That should not give a reason for an extortion of any kind. Why not you put entire environment-related issues completely on website, including the movement of files? Why should we not know? Suppose if your particular environment clearance is being processed by an expert committee, let the names of the expert committees, the minutes of the expert committees, let everything and everything.
Do you believe the process is very discretionary right now?
Actually, I personally feel that if you make it more and more transparent and do not try to keep a lot of discretion to the people.
Right.
You try to first have a dialogue with the industry. Say these are the standards we want to follow.
Right.
Some we want to follow immediately, but some will follow after 5 years.
Yes.
We are giving you time to improve
and get there
and work with them. Create a self-regulatory mechanism also, so that these allegations of abuse and misuse will go away.
Everything eventually on the 16th of May will boil down to numbers. Your mission is, the whole mission of the BJP is 272. I want to ask you a question. As a constituent of the NDA, do you believe it really, are you antagonistic to who leads the government? Are you more focused about change? You want the Congress out? You want an NDA-led government? Or are the NDA constituents also keeping a very close eye on only Mr. Modi should be Prime Minister? Are you antagonistic to who occupies 7 Racecourse Road?
Over a period of time, we are seeing the elections in India revolve around personalities. The issues are important, but who talks about the issues is also more important. And therefore, the personalities become very important. In this election is definitely a fight between Modi and others, very clearly. And the type of number of people who are rallying around the NDA are also largely doing it because of Mr. Modi's leadership. You cannot deny it. I'm not saying the only reason, but largely.
Yes.
So therefore, if the leader which will give votes, like Mr. Vajpayee, when he was the Prime Minister, then he was leading the campaign, the people were saying, oh, this Mr. Vajpayee is a government which must come to power. The same thing happened in early 70s when Indira Gandhi was there. In fact, one election was a very interesting election in which Indira Gandhi talking about Garibi Hatao. So Indira said, oh, I am saying, मैं कहती हूँ गरीबी हटाओ, ये कहते हैं इंदिरा हटाओ, आप तय कीजिए. So this is
personality-driven
happening now, that people are saying no Modi, and Modi is saying I want development. So Modi wants development, and people don't want Modi. So the choice is very clear. So I think the choice has been made like this.
If it boils down to numbers, and if it boils down to Modi not being a consensus candidate of larger allies who are wanting to come in, because if you do fall short of numbers, will it really matter to your party, or will it really matter to your political leadership who the eventual prime ministerial candidate is? Or will you keep insisting on Mr. Modi himself?
So he's already been declared as a candidate. In fact, after that only we are seeing a huge support which has been garnered for the NDA after that declaration. So I don't think that issue is anymore really an issue. In fact, Mr. Ramvilas Paswan joining in NDA is already talking about it. The new entrance to NDA from Tamil Nadu, they're already saying that it's Narendra Modi leadership which is actually bringing them here. So I think, in my opinion, personally, I personally feel that the leadership issue is almost settling the minds of the people. And because people are going to be the voters, it's already settling the minds of those who are seeking the votes.
I have a last question to ask of you, and you will have to answer in a yes or no. Am I speaking to Mr. Modi's energy minister?
Actually, I am not even contesting the election. I have the energy, but I don't think I'll be the minister because I'm not contesting the election. But it's the Prime Minister who decides whatever it should be the portfolio, who should be in his cabinet. But actually, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not hankering for any ministerial position or anything like this. For really, I'm telling you, and I really mean it, what is important is I opted out of election because I don't have enough money to fight an election. I opted out of that only because I feel that one must contribute to policy making, which is really necessary for India, because the policies will really differentiate a government and the other government. And how you implement it, of course, is as important. But if you do not have a proper policy, you do not have a proper product, then however better marketing methods you may have, you still will fail.
Mr. Prabhu, you've been very modest, but not every cabinet minister is a Lok Sabha MP. Thank you very much for talking to us.